One bullet. That's all it took. Or so the story goes. A 19-year-old assassin fires his pistol, and within weeks, the world erupts into the bloodiest war humanity had ever seen. But what if that's not the whole truth? What if we've been fed a dangerously oversimplified version of history? Today, we're going to expose the deeper, darker reasons behind World War I, the tangled web of alliances, militarism, and imperial ambitions that made global war inevitable, with or without that bullet. Let's start with the version most of us learned in school. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was assassinated in Sarajevo by Gavrilo Princip, a Bosnian Serb nationalist. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia, and within weeks, one by one, the world's great powers were at war. It's a neat and tidy explanation, simple cause and effect. But here's the truth: wars don't happen in a vacuum. One assassination, even of a high-profile royal, wouldn't normally ignite a global conflict. If anything, the assassination was the spark, not the fuel. To understand what really caused World War I, we have to look deeper at the political tensions, secret treaties, arms races, and imperial rivalries simmering long before that fateful day in Sarajevo. Imagine Europe in the early 20th century as a crowded room full of suspicious people tied together with tripwires. If one person stumbles, everyone falls. That's what the alliance system was like. In the decades leading up to 1914, Europe's major powers formed entangling military alliances meant to prevent war, but they ultimately had the opposite effect. Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy were part of the Triple Alliance. Meanwhile, France, Russia, and Britain formed the Triple Entente. These weren't just friendly diplomatic partnerships. They were military commitments. If one nation was attacked, the others were expected to jump in. When Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, Russia, as Serbia's protector, mobilized its forces. Germany, seeing Russian mobilization as a threat, declared war on Russia. France, bound by its alliance with Russia, was pulled in. Germany then declared war on France and invaded neutral Belgium, which prompted Britain to join the war. In just a few days, the alliances that were supposed to keep the peace triggered a global explosion. Let's talk militarism. By 1914, the great powers of Europe had been preparing for war for decades. Military spending skyrocketed. Nations glorified their armies and navies. Young men were raised to believe that serving in the military was the highest honor. War wasn't seen as tragic, it was seen as noble and inevitable. Germany, in particular, was obsessed with building up its military might, challenging British naval supremacy with its own fleet of battleships and dreadnoughts. Every country had war plans ready to go. Germany had the Schlieffen Plan, which required a quick strike through Belgium to defeat France before turning east to fight Russia. France had Plan 17, focused on reclaiming Alsace-Lorraine from Germany. Russia and Austria had their own strategies. These weren't defensive postures. They were offensive war plans based on the assumption that conflict was a matter of when, not if. So when the crisis of Franz Ferdinand's assassination occurred, the generals didn't hesitate. Mobilization meant escalation. And once you started the machinery of war, it was nearly impossible to stop. World War I wasn't just a European conflict. It became a world war because the European powers had empires that spanned the globe. At the heart of this was imperialism, the desire for colonies, resources, and strategic territory. Britain ruled over a quarter of the world's population. France held vast territories in Africa and Asia. Germany, a latecomer to empire building, was eager to catch up. The same went for Austria-Hungary, Russia, and even Italy. This scramble for imperial dominance created constant tension. Germany resented Britain and France for their massive colonial holdings. Britain feared German expansion and its growing navy. France and Germany clashed over control of Morocco, twice. Austria-Hungary and Russia were in a tug-of-war over influence in the Balkans, a volatile region full of ethnic tensions and nationalist movements. This wasn't just a Cold War of words. It was an era of brinkmanship, where each side pushed the limits of diplomacy to test the other's resolve. So when the assassination happened, it wasn't just about avenging a murdered archduke. It was about power, territory, pride, and who would shape the future world order. Now let's zoom in on the Balkans, the true powder keg of Europe. This region was a hotbed of nationalism, where multiple ethnic groups, Serbs, Bosnians, Croats, and others, were fighting for self-determination and independence from empires like Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. Serbia, in particular, had dreams of a greater Serbia, uniting all Serbs in the Balkans. Austria-Hungary saw this as an existential threat. Gavrilo Princip, the young man who pulled the trigger in Sarajevo, wasn't just a lone wolf. He was part of a nationalist network supported by elements within Serbia. Austria-Hungary's leaders knew this, but they also saw the assassination as an opportunity to crush Serbian nationalism once and for all. Gavrilo Princip, the young man who pulled the trigger in Sarajevo, wasn't just a lone wolf. He was part of a nationalist network supported by elements within Serbia. Austria-Hungary's leaders knew this, but they also saw the assassination as an opportunity to crush Serbian nationalism once and for all. Nationalism wasn't just a Balkan issue, either. Across Europe, people believed their nation was superior, destined to dominate. This arrogance made compromise nearly impossible and turned diplomacy into a zero-sum game. So, was World War I inevitable? Historians still debate that. But one thing is clear: the assassination of Franz Ferdinand was just the final push. The world was already on the brink. Decades of arms build-up and military planning, entangling alliances that ensured a local conflict would go global. Imperial rivalries stoking resentment and fear. Nationalism fueling hatred and rebellion. In fact, many leaders at the time welcomed war. They believed it would be short, decisive, and even beneficial, cleansing old grievances and reaffirming their nation's strength. They were wrong. Tragically wrong. Blaming World War I on an assassination alone is like blaming an avalanche on a single snowflake. The mountain was already unstable. The pressure had been building for years. By understanding the true causes of the war, we don't just uncover a more accurate history, we learn a critical lesson. Global conflict doesn't start overnight. It starts with ambition, fear, pride, and a refusal to see the warning signs. Let's not make that mistake again. White right pointing backhand index. If you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more deep dives into the real stories behind history.